When a new sultan took the throne, the very first thing he did was kill his own brothers. Not one, not two, sometimes 19 brothers strangled in a single night with a silk bowstring because Ottoman law said it was better to spill royal blood than to risk civil war. This is the empire that conquered Constantinople, brought Europe to its knees, and ruled 3 continents for 600 years. This is the story of the Ottoman Empire, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why historians call it one of the most powerful, most misunderstood empires that ever existed. Rewind to the late 1200s, no empire yet, no sultans, no palaces, no armies of thousands. Just a small band of nomadic Turkic warriors wandering the hills of Anatolia, led by a chieftain named Osman. Osman's people had fled west to escape one of the deadliest forces in human history, the Mongol invasions. They weren't kings, they were refugees with horses and swords. But Osman had something bigger empires didn't, a group of holy warriors or ghazis who believed they were destined to expand the frontier of Islam, one raid at a time. Osman and his warriors capitalized on a Seljuk dynasty that had been severely weakened by the Mongols, picking off territory piece by piece, while everyone else was busy fighting a bigger enemy. By the time Osman died, his tiny band of raiders had become something else entirely. His descendants would call themselves the House of Osman, Osmanli. Europeans mangled the pronunciation into a name that would soon make kings tremble. Ottoman. But here's what most people don't know. This empire almost died before it turned 100 years old. In 1402, a conqueror even more terrifying than the Ottomans themselves swept in from the east, Timur, also known as Tamerlane. At the Battle of Ankara, Timur's forces crushed the Ottoman army and captured the Sultan himself, Bayezid I, alive. The empire fractured into civil war between Bayezid's sons for over a decade. For a moment, Ottoman Empire could have been nothing more than a footnote, a promising state that rose fast and collapsed just as quickly. It didn't. The dynasty clawed its way back, and less than 50 years later, an Ottoman Sultan would do something no army had managed in 1,000 years. For over 1,000 years, one city stood as the last light of the Roman Empire. Constantinople, triple walls, impenetrable. In 1453, a 21-year-old sultan named Mehmed II decided he would be the one to succeed, where everyone else had failed. The Byzantines had one final trick, a massive iron chain stretched across the Golden Horn, blocking Ottoman ships from entering the harbor. Mehmed's solution: if the ships couldn't sail in, he'd walk them in. Ottoman engineers loaded warships onto wooden carts and physically wheeled them overland, dropping them directly into the harbor that chain was supposed to protect. Combined with a 53-day siege and cannons never before built at that scale, the walls that had stood for over a millennium finally broke. Constantinople fell. The Byzantine Empire, the last living fragment of ancient Rome, was gone. The city would be renamed. You know it today as Istanbul. Here's where it gets dark. Every empire has a weak point: succession. The Ottoman solution was called the law of fratricide, and it was exactly as brutal as it sounds. When a new sultan took power, he was expected to execute all of his brothers immediately, no trial, usually by strangulation, with a silk bowstring, because royal blood couldn't be spilled directly. When Mehmed III took the throne in 1595, he had 19 brothers executed in a single night, the largest royal fratricide in Ottoman history, including infants still nursing. One eyewitness account describes the funeral procession that followed as 19 small coffins carried through the streets of Istanbul. a sight so unsettling that even a population used to this law was shaken by it. Why did they do it? Because the alternative half-brothers scattered across the empire, each with their own army, each with a legitimate claim, was considered a far greater threat than a night of executions. This policy, however horrifying, guaranteed something almost no empire in history could guarantee: a single, undisputed ruler every single time. Later sultans softened it, replacing execution with lifelong imprisonment in a gilded cage inside the palace, which, depending on who you ask, might have been worse. Now picture an army made entirely of boys taken from conquered Christian villages in the Balkans, converted, trained from childhood. This was the Janissary Corps, and for 300 years they were the most feared infantry in the world. The system that created them was called the Devshirme, and here's the twist: these were slaves who could rise to become generals, governors, even grand viziers, because the system rewarded skill over bloodline. Armed early with firearms, long before most European armies adopted them at scale, the Janissaries became the terrifying tip of the Ottoman spear. Eventually, this elite corps would become so powerful that they'd start making and breaking sultans themselves. Here's what most people get wrong about the Ottomans: they weren't just conquerors. Under the millet system, Christians and Jews were classified as protected peoples, allowed to practice their own religions and run their own courts. When Spain expelled its Jewish population in 1492, the Sultan sent ships to bring them to Ottoman lands. Centuries later, during the Irish potato famine, Sultan Abdülmecid attempted to send 10,000 pounds to famine victims, 10 times what Queen Victoria had donated, and reportedly sent secret food shipments after being asked to reduce the amount. And life inside this empire wasn't only palaces and battlefields. In Istanbul's markets, you'd find spice merchants, silk traders, and public bathhouses that doubled as social clubs. Ottoman coffee houses became the era's version of a newsroom, where merchants, poets, and spies all traded gossip over the same cup. By the 1500s, the Ottoman Empire was arguably the superpower of the world. After Suleiman's father, Selim I, doubled the empire's size in just 8 years, conquering Egypt, Syria, and the Arabian Peninsula, the Ottoman Sultan claimed the title of Caliph, the political and religious leader of Sunni Islam, a title the dynasty held for 4 centuries. Suleiman the Magnificent then took the empire to its absolute peak across a 46-year reign, nearly 20 million square kilometers, over 35 million people. His chief architect, Mimar Sinan, designed mosques and bridges still studied by engineers today. But Suleiman's most consequential relationship wasn't with an architect. It was with a slave girl named Roxolana, captured and brought to the imperial harem as a teenager. She rose to become the only woman Suleiman ever legally married, breaking centuries of tradition in the process. European ambassadors wrote home in alarm about her political influence. She corresponded directly with foreign rulers and helped shape imperial succession. Decades later, another woman, Kursum Sultan, would effectively rule the empire as regent through the reigns of her son and grandson. Historians call this century-and-a-half stretch the Sultanate of Women, because behind the Sultan's throne, it was often women running the empire. The Ottomans besieged Vienna's gates not once but twice, in 1529 and again in 1683. That second failed siege is often marked as the moment Ottoman expansion into Europe finally stalled for good. And at sea, the empire wasn't invincible either. In 1571, an Ottoman fleet suffered a massive defeat at the Battle of Lepanto, one of the largest naval battles in history. No empire lasts forever. The bureaucracy that once ran 35 million people grew bloated. The Tanzimat reforms, meant to modernize the empire, instead helped trigger a debt crisis in the 1870s. Nationalism spread through the Balkans, tearing at an empire that had survived for centuries by not forcing everyone into one identity. Then came the final blow. World War I. The Ottomans allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary and lost. It's also important to say plainly that the empire's final years included one of its darkest chapters, the Armenian genocide, the systematic killing and deportation of Armenians carried out by the Ottoman government during the war, an event still recognized by many countries and historians today as genocide, and one whose full context deserves its own dedicated telling, beyond what a single overview video can responsibly cover. In 1922, the Sultanate was formally abolished. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, a military officer turned national hero, didn't just end the monarchy, he built an entirely new secular Republic of Turkey in its place. 600 years, 36 sultans, 3 continents, an empire that nearly died in its infancy at the hands of Tamerlane clawed its way back, conquered Constantinople and went on to make the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor lose sleep at night. Remember that silk cord from the beginning of this video. By the time you understand everything that cord protected, a dynasty that survived near total collapse, ran the world's most powerful multicultural state, and was quietly steered by women in the shadows of the throne for a century and a half. It stops being just a symbol of brutality. It becomes the thread holding together one of the most complicated, contradictory, and genuinely fascinating empires in human history. If this blew your mind, hit subscribe because next week we're covering the Sultan who was overthrown by his own elite soldiers. You do not want to miss that one.